What's the dumbest case you've ever had on jury duty? This guy was spotted beating up his own dog in a car park near Brighton. Now here in the UK we are pretty tolerant, but one thing that we won't put up with is cruelty to animals. This lady witnessed it and called the police. The police arrived and a young female officer walked over to talk to this guy. The idiot waved a knife in her face, then drove off in his van at speed, ramming the police car, nearly killing the other officer, then shot off along the coast road to Eastbourne. Now the other thing you don't do is threaten a police officer with a knife. Our police are usually very reasonable and polite, but you start waving a knife at one and you will be in extremely serious trouble. At this point I should add that our defendant, a cocky little shit who had told the jury his nickname was Wind Up because he enjoyed winding up the police, had dismissed his own barrister and was conducting his own defense. Big mistake, as we will see. The prosecution then showed the traffic camera footage of a mammoth chase from Brighton, through New Haven, Seaford, East Dean, all the way to Eastbourne, about 20 miles, with this Krusty's ancient old van, complete with a chimney sticking out the roof, being chased by 13 police cars and a helicopter. They tried everything to stop him, but our maniac drove on the wrong side of the road, nearly killed pedestrians, and managed to keep going. It was like the wacky races on steroids, I am not kidding. We jurors were spellbound. Finally, on his way back to Brighton on the main A27, the idiot was brought to a stop by a stinger, a kind of spiked board they throw under the car to puncture the tires. The last video is from the helicopter. It shows 13 car loads of extremely angry coppers hauling this asshole out of his van and starting to beat the living shit out of him before the video gets cut. He was then hauled away to Polegate Police Station, near Eastbourne. One of the jurors was very concerned about the dog. Was the dog okay? She was reassured the dog was taken away and is being looked after. Mr. Windup conducted his own defense. He cross-examined every witness, using phrases like, "Is it not the case? And I put it to you." A real jailhouse lawyer. It eventually became obvious his sole defense was that the whole was a setup. He was nowhere near the event. It was not him driving, and he was being persecuted because the police hated him. As jurors, we then ensured every witness identified Mr. Windup as the driver at the time. The prosecuting brief, a lady, cheerfully informed Mr. Windup that while conducting his own defense and cross-examining the witnesses he had somehow slipped up legally, and the prosecution was now allowed to read a list of his previous convictions to the jury. Wow. This is usually never permitted as it could prejudice a fair trial. Mr. Windup's previous convictions read like the script from a slasher movie. Drug dealing, assault, grievous bodily harm, malicious wounding, assault with a deadly weapon. The list went on and on and on. Not a nice chap, Mr. Windup. He sat there glowering. Not such a clever chap after all, are we? On several occasions we jurors had to be removed from the courtroom as His Honor tried to deal with Windup's outbursts and bad behavior. Finally we jurors are let out to deliberate. All the men were immediately convinced of his guilt. It was a total no-brainer. Hitting the dog hadn't helped his case one bit. One or two of the ladies were not so sure. After all, it was his word against the police. The video footage was too grainy to actually see who was driving, and the cops had foolishly destroyed his van without dusting for his prints. Luckily yours truly was there to seal the verdict. I reminded the ladies that Mr. Windup had already boasted about his reputation of winding up, lying, deceiving and causing trouble for the police. Furthermore, how can he explain the fact that he was detained in Polegate Police Station, 20 miles from Brighton? If he was just being persecuted by Brighton police, was it likely that several neighboring police forces were in cahoots to target him? The ladies agreed and we filed back in and returned a guilty verdict. Mr. Windup was not in the slightest perturbed. Only when the judge committed him to a psychiatric hospital for assessment he went absolutely mental and had to be restrained. How apt. 2 months later I learned he had been sentenced to 2 years in jail. 2 years. For hitting a dog, threatening a lady cop, ramming a cop car, driving like a maniac, endangering life and limb, resisting arrest and being in possession of a lethal weapon. Oh well, that's British justice.